in that moment, I was plunged into this black void of absolutely nothing. It was completely vast. It just went forever. And I felt like this tiny speck of dust in this universe of just black.
Hello, hello. This is the Let's Talk Near Death podcast, where we're talking about all things life, death, and experiences somewhere in between. My guest today had a very significant spiritually transformative experience. She's a fellow Kiwi based over here in the South Island of New Zealand. She runs a glamping business by day. She runs spiritual retreats, and she's all about spreading the awareness on spiritual things, about helping to raise consciousness, about living our best life with love and being kind and all of these beautiful things. Our guest today is called Amber Tyrrell. So Amber, welcome along to the Let's Talk Near Death podcast.
Thank you so much, Kirsty. It's such an honor to be on your podcast.
Tell us a little bit about your story. Well, tell us the whole story if you're up to it. What happened? What was going on in your life, and what caused your experience?
Well, it was quite a long time ago now, 27 and a half years ago. I was in labor with my first baby. I ended up having 4 babies, so this was my first baby. He was born 5 weeks early. I was in Christchurch, and I had developed a leak. So the something had happened where the amniotic fluid was leaking so very slowly for 3 days. So my midwife sent me into Christchurch Women's Hospital to for some tests. I think they did some blood tests, and if they'd shown that there was infection, they would have induced me the next day. So I was in hospital overnight at Christchurch Women's, and I spontaneously went into labour in the middle of the night, around about midnight, 1 in the morning, somewhere around there. And so I was sent down to the labour ward, and I was, as it is, in the middle of contractions, and it was around about lunchtime the next day. So I'd been in labour for probably 12 hours already, and then something started to happen, and I can only say that it was a profound mystical experience that I went through. It was a near-death experience, but it wasn't a normal experience in that I didn't clinically die, but I went to the other side and came back. And so it started with I happened to be in the bath, and then I can't say it was a voice, but I like to say it was God that was communicating with me. So God, it might have been my higher self, it might have been some very advanced high being, but I'll just say God for simplicity's sake. Started communicating with me. And the first thing that God said was, everything begins with a thought. And so then the beginning of the manifestation is a thought. And then it was really weird, because it was like I went through all of these tests, but the tests happened parallel to a contraction. So as I was going through a contraction, a contraction will start. It will get more painful, or the contraction peaks and then it subsides. So it goes in waves, right? As I was going through and up into that peak of the contraction, I would go through a test. And so the first one was thought, and I would understand it at different levels of consciousness. So I would understand it, you know, everything begins with a thought, okay, you know, and then I'd understand it like have an aha at a new level of that concept. And then at the top level, it was like a profound, oh, okay. And then the test would stop and the contraction would stop and subside. And then I'd have, you know, like a minute's rest. I don't know how far apart the contractions were at that stage, but as this went along, I was getting more, the contractions were getting tougher, and so were the tests. So I went through these tests and God communicating with me all the time. And then God said, you're going to die. And I was like, I'm going to die. Okay. Didn't believe it. And then it went to the level. You're going to die. I don't believe that, but there is some doubt. But it went up and up and up until the contraction peaked, and then I was fully aware and down to the cells of my being. There's no words to describe the understanding that I was going to die. And so but then the next contraction came, and it would be a new test, like don't judge others. And then I thought about a person that I had judged, and I realized I was told that everyone's on their own journey. It's not for any of us to judge. And, you know, just allow and right up to the highest understanding of not judging others. And meanwhile, so then the next one came along, and and it might have been about going with the flow. So as in when you're in labor as well, you can't resist it. You can just go with it, breathe through it. And so then the next one came, and all the while I was aware that I was going to die. And then I was told that I was going to hell. And so I was in the shower at this point, and I fell. Meanwhile, I'm breathing on the nitrous oxide through the contractions as well. And then I was in the shower and I fell against the wall. And in that moment, I was plunged into this black void of absolutely nothing. It was completely vast. It just went forever. And I felt like this tiny speck of dust in this universe of just black void. There was nothing. And if I was to try and put a timeline on it, there was no time in this space. But if I was trying to put a timeline on it, it would have been maybe an hour I was there. And I had to will myself to come back. And I focused on light and looking for light, and I finally saw this tiny speck of light, and I honed in my focus onto this light, and then I was rapidly brought back. And I felt this place felt heavy, but as I came back into my body, I felt lighter and very relieved. I don't know why I called it hell. I was told it was hell, but it was just a black void of nothing. And so I had fallen against the wall, and I stood straight up. It was only a second. And as I was coming back, God said to me, you don't know what anyone's going through until you've experienced it yourself. And I stood up, and my husband, who was with me all through this, he repeated those exact words. And I was like, whoa. And then the midwife said to Patrick, thinking that I couldn't hear her, that I was getting spaced out on the nitrous oxide. And then my God said to me, you would be having this experience anyway. Even if you weren't on the gas, you'd be having this experience anyway. So I stood up and carried on. I said to my husband, I said, everything's going to be okay. And I wanted to say that just in case I did die. Well, I knew I was going to die. I wanted him to think back, and I couldn't tell him. I couldn't tell him what was going on. I had to keep it. I had this sense that I had to keep it to myself. And so I was hoping he would look back and think, oh, she knew, and she knew that everything was going to be okay. So then the contractions carried on, the teachings carried on, but this time I felt like a new sense of amazement, and then I was like super grateful. But then I was told I was going to die again. And, so that was a very brief moment. But then I was told I was going to die again. And so now the contractions were getting more and more difficult. The tests were getting more difficult. I would go through a contraction and another test. I would pass the test, the contraction would finish. And then it was getting near the end, like I was fully dilated, and it was getting near the end. And but at the same time, I felt every bit of pain. It's the most painful thing I've ever been through. It was incredibly painful. At the same time, I was more psychically aware, and although my mum, it wasn't arranged for my mum to come to the hospital, and at that time she lived 3.5 hours drive south. There was a knock on the door, and I knew it was my mum. And I said, oh, that's Mum. And the door opened and Mum walked in. And I said to her, where's Dad? Because I was disappointed that Dad hadn't come to say goodbye to me before I died. So they all thought I was just a little bit bonkers at that stage. So then all these tests, and I was actually told things in these tests and teachings. I was told that everything's unfolding exactly as it should. Everything in the world, all the bad stuff, all the good stuff, and we have to go through the bad stuff so that it catapults us to evolve. And I was told that everything's getting better and better. And when I think back now, I think that means the consciousness on the planet is rising, and that everything's getting better and better. The consciousness is getting bigger and higher. And I was told that everything in life is connected. Everything's connected. And I was shown patterns. I was shown patterns of how life, the life cycles, like the seasons and the planet's rotation, and how these everything works in cycles, and that there's cycles within cycles. And it's hard for me to understand now, but I understood it fully at the time. It was like I was given secrets to the universe. But then, so it was, these contractions were getting more and more difficult. I was coming near the end where I was fully dilated, and it was time to start pushing. Just before that happened, I was catapulted, I can only say catapulted, into the universe. Just remembering it makes me emotional, but I found myself in the universe there was stars and moons and planets and nebulae and colors, beautiful colors. It went forever. It was the most beautiful, peaceful, wonderful place. And I didn't see any relatives. There was no tunnel or white light, or just, it was just straight into the universe. And the greatest teaching of all came, and that was the teaching of love. And that love is the fabric of the universe, and that we are all entwined into this fabric of the universe. And I was just completely enveloped by it. And then I was shown, I was given choice. So there was another lesson, is choice. And I was shown, I was looking down on, like, I was shown my lifetimes. And it was like looking down from the heavens onto these little lines. And there was like tiny little lines that were connected and separated. And there was little points in these lines that was sparkling. And I was shown that there was this tiny sparkle of a point, which was the experience I was having right at that moment. And it gave me perspective, because I'd lived thousands of lifetimes. And where the lines connected and separated was, you know, when you make a choice to go in a different direction, you change timelines. And so I was looking down on all of my lifetimes that were happening all at once. And so I saw this tiny speck, and look, and this was the experience I was having now, and it gave huge perspective. And then I was told that I could stay there in this beautiful love. I was told that I didn't have to come back. I was told that this is my last lifetime, and I won't be coming back again after this. And that I had to make a choice whether to stay there or come back. And then I was shown, if I didn't come back, if I chose to stay there, if I didn't come back, I was shown what would happen. And I saw my parents grieving. They'd already lost a daughter. This gets me every time, sorry.
No, that's okay.
I was shown my parents grieving after losing a second daughter, and my husband left with this tiny baby to bring up on his own. And so, but it was very difficult, but obviously I came back. And pulling myself away from that incredible love was difficult, more difficult than anything. And that's at the point where I learned about truly letting go and releasing and letting go. And then I came back into my body, and, you know, feeling the pain and the heaviness, and then it all stopped. and that was it. It all stopped. It was incredible. It was completely mind-blowing. And I was left with this mind-blowing experience, and not knowing whether to tell people, or, you know. Yeah.
Thank you, Amber. It's such a touching experience, such a touching story. When it involves anything to do with children or childbirth, I kind of feel like there's just something that plays on my heart as a mum myself. Did it go forward? Was it all okay? Was your daughter born?
Yes, it was all fine. Yes. We were about 7 or 8 days in the hospital, because she was 5 weeks early and had jaundice, and but it was hard to get breastfeeding established, but we got there, and she's now 27 years old and an artist and a winemaker, and she's wonderful.
Wow. Oh, the whole way through, I was wondering, does this end out okay? Is the daughter
Yeah,
okay? Yeah.
thanks.
Oh, amazing. Now, I've got a couple of questions for you. There's been some things that you shared within your experience, which
Mm.
really got me thinking. One is you're talking about how you're having these contractions, like waves of contractions, and at the same time, you're having these lessons, which are revealing things that you suddenly understand or lessons that you learnt. Now, one thing you said was I would have the contraction and I would have the lesson, I'd pass the lesson and it would stop. Was there a point where you could fail the lesson?
I've never, maybe,
Does
if
that
I
even,
didn't,
does
I
that make
think it,
sense?
yes, yes, it does make sense, because I wonder if I didn't get it. I think I was being pushed through it though.
Yeah,
Um,
okay.
and I was told that everything that happened in this, because this happened over about 2 to 3 hours, so it was quite a few hours that it happened for.
Yeah,
Um, and I was told at the end that I'd learned everything that I need to know to reach enlightenment. So, so if uh, I don't know if I could stop it. It was happening anyway. So I
yeah.
don't know if I could have failed it. It was happening whether I liked it or not, and it was very difficult to go through.
Oh,
We're
yes.
dealing with and giving birth to a baby and going through the contractions of that at the same time.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was told that in that I had learnt everything that I need to know, which doesn't really make sense, because I'm really a work in progress,
Oh, we
Of-
all are. We all are. And there's nothing about these experiences that makes us come back and we've got it all sorted out, that we understand everything because we forget a lot of things. So that was actually my next question is I was thinking, oh, what were the lessons? What were these things? You explained some of them. Can you
yes.
remember the lessons or the learning outcomes, I'll say? Can you remember
So
what the lessons taught you?
yes, well, so just for example, like going with the flow. There's an example of it, going with the flow, and applying it to your life.
Yeah.
Um, you get these prompts from the universe, or you might meet someone that will send you give you an idea about something and send you in another direction. It's about using your intuition, and
Mm.
because I do believe that we are being guided, and the universe has our back, and we see it a lot, because we meet people every day with our glamping business, and we see it a lot with how it's so interesting, the types of people that book on the same night. And for example, one night we had 5 white Toyotas lined up in the car park, all rental cars, all people staying that night from all overseas. But the funny thing about that is the marketing manager for Toyota Australia was staying that night too. And there was
Oh,
five.
wow.
So how can that's not an accident.
Yeah.
That's the universe arranging it. Just by going with the flow and not resisting, um, not trying to control things too much. I understood that one teaching at 7 levels of consciousness. So I
Oh,
went
okay.
through those 7 levels of consciousness, finally got it at the highest level. Contraction stopped, rest, next contraction, and next lesson started. There was so many as like I tried to write everything down. It was only 2 years later that I tried to write everything that I remembered, but there were so many, and I guess uh, we have incarnation after incarnation, and there might be certain lessons that we need to learn in that lifetime. It might be about humility, or it might be about, I don't know, there's so many, isn't there? But I went through all of those ones that you need to learn as a human being to pass the test and reach enlightenment. So I was told that I had become enlightened when I was shot into the universe,
Mm,
and that
mm.
I could come back to complete this last lifetime. And I've got a ways to go. So, yeah.
I find it so fascinating when you're talking there about synchronicities, all the white Toyotas, the types of cars, and then the marketing managers there. It's quite funny. Like, it's easy to go, oh, that's just a thing. But I look at life and I go, there are so many things and so many coincidences, so many synchronicities that happen. And that going with the flow, it's, well, which flow are we going with? And I loved what you talked about, how we've all got these inner promptings and support. And I think the flow we need to go with is, what is our spiritual team telling us? What are we feeling is the right thing for our life? Because it's very easy to go with the flow and go, well, I'll just lie on the couch and watch TV all the time. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm saying, rather than considering what is it that's prompting us, then taking the easiest or the most self-satisfying option, I suppose. So I look around,
Mm.
there's synchronicities everywhere. I don't think they're by mistake. You mentioned at one point when you were explaining your experience, you mentioned patterns and how we're all interweaved. And it's definitely not the first time that I've heard about patterns.
Yeah.
Actually, there are so many things in what you said where I'm thinking, yes, I've heard this, I've heard this. Not because I've heard
Mm.
it and it's common, but it's just there seem
Mm.
to be elements. Every experience is so unique and so
Yeah.
similar at the same time.
Yeah.
Do you have any flashbacks to these lessons?
No, but I go through life at the end when when this had all finished, you know, and then I'm back in 3D reality with a
Mm,
new tiny baby to look after. I just I keep thinking about what I learned, and the main thing, the main two things, is that everything is unfolding perfectly as it is,
mm,
and do everything with love in your heart.
yeah.
So those are the two main lessons I took away from this whole experience. Um, and it just, if I just remind myself of that, if I'm going through tough times, um, it just feels so right, and it just makes me feel good, you know, like everything's unfolding perfectly as it is, and so that just takes any pressure away, and
Mm,
love is all that matters.
mm,
Love is all that matters at the end of
mm.
the day. And I know I'm going to go back there, and I'm loving life. I really love my life, but I'm really looking forward to
I can relate to
that.
that. Yeah. And you said you
Yeah.
you knew that this was the last one. So how hard was it to actually come back and complete this life?
Um, well, not hard, because I wanted to be here for my baby and my husband. And it is hard being in 3D, yes, of course, um, because those 7 levels of consciousness, this is the bottom level. And there's levels within levels as well, levels of frequency and
Mm,
consciousness. And this is the bottom. We're in Hertzian, which is the bottom level of frequency. Um, and yes, it's hard. It is hard being here, knowing what it's like to be at that level of consciousness. Um, but because a lifetime isn't that long, I'm just like so excited, you know.
yeah.
I don't have to wait too long
Yeah.
if you look at the whole spectrum of things and how many lifetimes and life is eternal. So
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Because you talked about having, after you've been shot out into the universe, which sounds so incredible. You talked about looking down and seeing all of the lifetimes, and I believe you said that you'd had thousands of lifetimes,
Mm.
and you
It
could
was, there
see
was,
them all
oh,
connected.
yes, they were like little lines, and that, like, there'll be a line, and then it would join up with another line, but they were all stacked next to each other, and then there was little points on these lines where it was a significant moment in that life.
Yeah.
And so that experience I was having was a significant moment, and it shone like I looked down, I could see it, and it was in the middle of thousands of lifetimes,
Mm.
and and it was everything's connected. And that was the other thing I forgot to say is when I was in the universe, I was shown that we are all connected. We were part of that fabric of love, which is
Mm.
woven through everyone and everything,
Mm.
and so we're all connected in that way. And so it was different. It was over the years I've listened to many, read a lot, and listened to a lot of near-death experiences, and I haven't heard of one like this before, where I wasn't clinically dead, and it was just almost like I bypassed that level where you meet up with loved ones that have passed over, and just went straight into the universe.
Yeah. I've actually interviewed quite a few people who've had the experience, but not the death piece. So these are very significant spiritual experiences. It's hard to define when someone actually is dead. Like, what is death? I don't believe it's a black and white thing. That's kind of what we're taught, is you are either alive or dead, whereas I believe there's a whole veil, and
Right.
it's hard to explain, like a thinness, a place, a time, you can't even put words on it, actually. I don't think it's black
No.
and white from one moment to the next. I think it's something that happens over time, whether we're aware of it or not. Possibly we're
Yeah.
not. But yeah, I've actually spoken with and interviewed quite a few people who didn't have the death moment, but had a very
That's
similar experience. And actually, in one of our recent episodes, we talked with Alan Pierce, who is exploring coma experiences.
yeah. I
And
listened to that, and it blew my mind. I
it
love
blew
to have
my
my mind.
mind.
Yeah,
Yep.
I've never heard of that before. It was amazing to
No,
hear those stories.
I know. I hadn't really thought about it either, but to hear the similarities. And so I've gone down a bit of a rabbit hole. I'm in some of the Facebook groups now because, being a coma survivor, being a near-death experiencer myself, I was able to get into some of the private conversation groups. And it's fascinating. I'm not saying I'm in there to snoop or anything like that, but I'm curious. So death isn't always the checkbox for these experiences. A lot of people think, well, if you didn't die, you haven't had the experience, or it wasn't a real experience because your heart didn't stop. But I believe there's all different experiences that take place, and that's what this whole podcast is about. We even talk about life and living, life, death, and experiences somewhere in between, because there are so
Yes,
many. I'm curious about
yes.
past lives. When you talked about seeing your lives, I mean, I find that very fascinating to think about past lives, but to hear that you believe you've had thousands of them, it really
Well,
makes me wonder, what is the point of all of this? Why are we here? Why do you think you've had so many lives?
I believe a lot of us have had thousands of lives, or hundreds of. I mean, we are eternal beings.
Mm.
We've been around forever, um, and we choose to have incarnations on Earth, or maybe on other planets. Who knows?
Who knows?
Um, and so I believe this I've done a lot of reading and been to spiritual retreats and over in America and in Australia.
Mm.
And I believe that at the moment, having an incarnation on Earth is like the ultimate test, basically, to advance your evolution. So the patterns that I was shown, I was shown involution and evolution, and within those cycles of involution and evolution, which takes a long time, there's smaller cycles of evolvement, and like up and down, and so yeah, it just I'm probably one of many that's had thousands of lives. We may all have had thousands of lives. So,
I love it. It's such a juicy topic. I love it. It's exciting. I love thinking about, even why we like things, what we feel connected to. There's so many things that can cross over, and even generationally, I've got to say that right. You know the word I mean. Things can carry over, things can be sent forward. I just think it's such a fascinating topic. I don't know much about my past lives. I've had a couple of past life readings, haven't quite worked out much around that. But I'm like you. I'm actually just so happy in this lifetime. I'm all about living the life, going with the flow. I'm all about having experiences and make it a really juicy, good life. But there's a little part of me that goes, oh, it's kind of exciting that one day I'll get to go do something else, or I'll be somewhere else. Or, I personally believe that we get to meet up with our past loved ones when we die. So there's a piece of that, I want to see my family members and my pets, and that's exciting. But I also love life. I'm not ready to go yet. Yeah, I think people have different experiences here, different levels of how easy or hard it is, how joyful or not joyful it is. We make a lot of our reality, I think.
Yes.
But yeah,
We
I
do.
love to
We
ask
create
people why
it.
we think we're here.
Yes. Oh well. It's the big school of it's a bit of a hard knock life, but I've heard that we're going through a time in our history where we're going from one age to the next, and it's part of the natural evolution of our evolution. We've been through the dark ages, and now we're going into a new age, and that so many people have incarnated on the planet at this time because it's such an opportunity to really advance yourself. And so like they want it's difficult to be able to come to Earth. There's many souls that would like to come and don't make it. So if you've actually made it, that's incredible. And there's so many souls here that want this opportunity, and there's a lot of star seeds that have incarnated to help raise the consciousness of the planet. And the planet itself is a living being, and the consciousness of the planet is raising. So we are raising with it, and the star seeds are all over, and they're helping people just with their frequency help raise the consciousness of humanity.
I do think there is something happening. If you're listening to this and you're not really sure what star seeds are, you can go and do a little bit of research. There's different groups there. I've heard all sorts of different names of people who are coming through, who are living here, and they're bringing some kind of perspective or some gifts or some outlook to help the world and to raise the vibration while they're here, or to have lessons. I've heard so many different theories. There's quite a lot out there, so just go have a little research around that. It's fascinating stuff. I don't know. Did you come back with any kind of purpose, or I'm still sort of stuck on why we're here? Why would you have thousands of lives? Do you feel like you came back to be a part of that awareness, the raising the vibration? Anything in
At
particular?
first I didn't. I was too busy having babies.
Yeah. You've had 4 children, haven't you?
Yes, and that experience didn't happen again with the other three, and it was far less painful with the
Yeah.
other three. Um, I, um, what was your question again? Sorry, Kirsty.
Oh gosh. I think it was whether you felt like you had any specific purpose coming back.
Oh, yes. Yes, that's right. So at first felt, well, I had a lot of work to do, if I was to help other people. I've been through a lot as a teenager. When I was 13 years old, I witnessed the death of my 11-year-old sister.
Oh,
And my teenage years were just horrible.
mm,
And but it sent me on my spiritual path. It sent me seeking, my mother and and I was an avid reader of spiritual books as a teenager.
mm,
Um, and I've become a student of a spiritual school, and my husband is too. Over the years, we've learned so much, and we've learned disciplines in the school that help how you teach you how to create your own reality, create the life that you want. And we've learned so much about sort of ancient history,
mm,
about the brain and how it works, and about consciousness, and it's all really fascinating stuff.
mm,
Um, but there was one thing that I can look back, and for example, my sister that died. I believe it may have been a soul contract for me to witness her death for some reason. I don't know why,
mm,
and I say that because there was 3 times before that she could have died, and I was always with her. She had accident, like for example, we were crossing a road in Invercargill one time across a pedestrian crossing, and we were only about 11 and 9, and one car stopped, but there was 2 lanes, and there was another car that didn't see us as we were crossing in front of the first car,
mm,
and she was about to take a step in front of that car, and I pulled her back just in time, and it just missed her. um, and there was 2 other times, when she was really little, but um, and it's when I look back, I think there must have been some sort of soul contract
mm,
for me to witness her death, um, because it was supposed to put us on that spiritual path.
mm.
I mean, um, so yeah, there's I now believe that maybe I am here to help other people, inspire people to learn about healing trauma, creating joy, and creating the life that you love.
Oh, I'm all for that. I just think that's fabulous. I think we should all be trying to encourage people and live with love, lead with love, put it first, prioritize love and kindness. And I know it sounds really sappy and the words have been so overused, but if we can just live quality lives, looking after people, putting love first, and I don't know, there's so much in it. The
Yeah,
world would be in such a good place if we could just go
yeah,
in that flow that you're talking about, the correct flow. So we've got to be careful around that one. Um,
yes,
yeah, there's a whole conversation even about that. Actually, I find this such a big topic. You said you love this topic, and I'm thinking the topic is so enormous, so
it
many
is.
elements, because it's anything and everything as well as being just this tiny topic. I absolutely love
Mm.
it. Amber, thank you
Yeah,
so much for sharing your experience. It sounds extremely profound. I can see, and I know from just chatting with you briefly that it's profoundly impacted you and changed the way that you live, changed the way that you see the world. And now you're running these retreats and trying to help as many people as you can. And I just think that's fabulous.
yeah.
So I greatly appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Amber Tyrrell, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kirsty. I loved our chat. Thank you.